Daniel Kiptoo, the Director General of the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority. Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you, Eric.
How was your Easter?
Well, my Easter has been busy. Not busy because I'm on holiday, but busy because we were trying to make sure that we've self-corrected the market and we make sure that Kenyans have fuel to be able to travel up country, to go on their holiday, and ensure that normalcy returns.
So it has just been made busy for you by what else has happened the previous week?
No, the last couple of weeks have been quite challenging, particularly the last 3.5, 4 weeks, because we've seen a lot of things happening in the market. And I think this is first from a geopolitical standpoint. We've been seeing what has been happening and the events globally, particularly with the global supply chain. Petroleum products are globally traded commodity. So we don't have a lot of influence or we don't have a lot of hold on what happens internationally with this globally traded commodity. And I think geopolitically, we all know what's been happening in Russia and Ukraine. We have seen on a month by month, particularly last month and the month before, what is unprecedented. We've not seen a jump in the cost of product. For instance, like super has gone up about $250 a metric ton on a month by month. Diesel rather, super is about $130, $140. And for us, we actually import our product based on what is called an open tender system. And what happens internationally actually affects us locally. So really that has been the bigger issue that we've seen. There are other structural issues which we could be able to discuss with you. But at the end of the day, where we are is we've actually had to step in to ensure that Kenyans actually have this commodity which is much needed.
Something that has always puzzled me.
Yes.
It is true. Petroleum products are influenced by the international goings-on. Now, not very long ago, we had this terrible, horrible disease called COVID. And at some point, we were told because people wanted traveling and the demand for fuel had gone down to next to zero, the price of fuel also had gone, well, crude oil, so to speak, had gone down to almost zero. But it didn't really affect the price at our pumps that much. I didn't see a significant lowering of it. I heard logic, reasons that were given, that you see it depends on when you bought it. And purchasing here. So I want to understand, when petroleum products are purchased, is it like sugar, which when I buy, I'm actually given and I walk home with it? Or is it something that I place an order for 1 month, 2, 3 months, and I'm locked onto the price that I bought it at? So at a prudent time, I then get the supplies in the tranche that I need? How does this work?
Yeah, maybe how it works before I get there. Just with COVID, I think you probably didn't notice because we're all at home at the time. We're all working from home, we're all at home. Between August of 2020, there was a crash in the prices. The barrel per dollar went to about $30 per barrel. We actually had pump prices of about close to 80 shillings, 78 to 80 shillings per litre.
In Kenya?
In Kenya. But not many Kenyans noticed this because all of us were at home and we didn't really pay a lot of attention to that.
Those guys were coming to work.
Yes, that's what we're asking.
But you don't remember fueling.
No, you did. I will get you the numbers on what our public pump prices were. But it was about 79, 80 shillings. But it's because the demand was really low. And really that's the reason. But just going back to COVID, and I think this is one of the areas where nobody anticipated, even with this crisis that we have with Russia and Ukraine, nobody really anticipated that the market would rebalance so quickly and economies would come out of COVID so fast. Other than air travel, which is still struggling a bit, there was really a rebalancing of the economies globally quite quickly, and demand quickly caught up, and supply was not catching up as fast. And that's part of the challenge that we've seen in terms of the price. And this is a demand and supply issue. Just going back to your question around how do you import petroleum products into the country? We do operate what is called an open tender system. This open tender system is the method how we procure and import petroleum products into this country. It's a very celebrated system. Actually, a lot of countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, have borrowed from it. So what happens, Kenya imports products into this country through the port of Mombasa, not only for Kenya's consumption, but also for regional consumption. We have landlocked countries such as Uganda, South Sudan, part of Eastern DRC, Rwanda, that import products through our system. So what then happens is that we do a 3-month projection. What is our global demand as a country, and what is also the demand from other countries. So Kenya's infrastructure is also used by other countries. So the ratio in which local and transit is shared historically has been by principle 60-40. So we have your KPC system, you have your jetty in Mombasa, and you have your storage terminal, Kiptoo terminal. You then do a 3-month projection and say, what is our demand, not only for Kenya, but for the region, split on that 60-40 basis. You then go out and
60
being local, 60% of that volume being for the local market and 40% being for the transit market.
Okay.
You then go and plan for a tender. And this tender is run by the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining and oversighted by us as the regulator, where you have the companies that we license as importers. They have a right to participate in this open tender. That's why it's called an open tender system, where you then bid to import product into the country. And as I said, because it's a globally traded commodity, you do have an international benchmark called Platts. So we use Mediterranean Platts to then price our product. What then these companies compete on is what is called freight and premium. What is the cost of moving that product from the port of origin to the port of Mombasa? And what is ideally is your premium, which is your profit. It's a very open and transparent system. So
how many companies participate in this?
You have your importers. You have about close to 90 odd companies that are licensed to import product into the country.
Do they all import?
But they don't all import. There are those who focus on importation because that's a trading business. And there are those who wait to receive their entitlement from these companies to be able then to distribute.
Okay.
So how do you share between these companies? That's another question that probably your viewers and your listeners would have. This is shared on the basis of market share and basis of allege allocation. So allege is the capacity of the system.
Okay, before we get there, Daniel,
yes,
let's just
Eric.
start understanding this open tender system clearly, because we have heard about it very many times. We've talked about it on the show.
Yes.
So the projection here is 3 months projection. And then who determines this projection, the demand projection? Is it the market that comes to say that this is what our needs are going to be, or is it EPRA that decides that this is how much has been consumed in the last 3 months, so we project the same to be consumed? Who comes up with this figure of the 3 months?
You have a multi-sectoral committee that has industry represented, that has the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining represented, that has the Kenya Pipeline Company represented, which we then oversight as the regulator.
Okay.
That basically says, because you have to match your capacity, because you cannot import product if you have nowhere to store it. So you have to look at what capacity does Kenya Pipeline have, what is the demand projection into the country. You then balance those two and then come up with this number.
Okay.
And that number then globally is then shared amongst the all importing companies that are licensed by EPRA on a pro rata basis based on your market share.
Are Kenya Pipeline the only people who have the capacity for storage?
No. You do have private terminals owned by all marketing companies. For you to be able to have a private terminal that is connected to the KPC system, it is what we call a common user facility. So if you build your own facility and you want it connected to the system, there's a principle called open access that we need you to be able to apply to, and you need to be able to have this common user facility, share your capacity pro rata to the market, so that then you don't use your facility to then gain market share or have anti-competitive practices.
Okay.
Yes, Angela.
There's a lot of English that has been spoken amongst you three. Let me just boil it down a little bit. Let me understand this. You're a regulatory body. You're an oversight.
Yes.
You're like Parliament for the oil
Yes,
oil
we're the
industry.
regulator.
Yes. Because, what I heard when I first came in is y'all didn't pay your bill to the oil marketers companies, right? Or the oil market corporation. There's a outstanding debt, right? And then government has gone to pay this bill, correct?
There is no bill as at today.
Okay, because I was told it's going to be cleared. But you are not in charge of paying anybody.
No, we are not. That is a government side.
So you're like the Media Council of Kenya, but then every other media house does whatever they want to do, correct?
Not really.
Do they have to come to you to seek all these?
Yes, before the government compensates the oil marketers, because they're the ones who set the price. There is a pricing regulation.
Yeah.
So we are the ones who compute the price. Once you compute the price, we then also communicate to government who is entitled to what.
So you determine how much it costs when I'm going to pump my gas. You're the one.
That is correct.
In consultation with everybody else?
Yes, there is a formula. There's a regulation. It's a formula. So it's really the building blocks. For instance, what is the landed cost? So for us to determine what the average landed cost would be, we take the cargoes, which are the vessels, the boats, so to speak, that come into the country between the 9th of the pricing month to the 10th. So from the 9th of March to the 10th of April, we then take the number of vessels that have come. And as I said, you already know what the price of that vessel is, what volume it's carrying, and based on a tender that was conducted 2 months back.
DG, Kizungu nyingi. Alafu, let me ask, so was there a shortage because you didn't pay your bills on time? Or was there a shortage because there was no product in the market?
There was a shortage because there was a lot of uncertainty.
What is that supposed to mean?
Uncertainty on the oil marketers' side. From the government side, there was no issue around payment because the government so far has paid 49 billion, including the bill that was paid on Thursday, which will then be hitting the marketers' accounts tomorrow. That was the outstanding balance of the 14 billion. But before that, the government had already paid over 34 billion.
So what was causing the uncertainty in the market?
The uncertainty was caused by two things. One was jittery by the oil marketers, which from government we were not sure why it was coming, because the government has always paid its bills. And as you say, a government is a government in perpetuity. So if you're owed money by a government and the government has processes in terms of payment, as I said, let me explain how this compensation works. We compute the price. Once we announce the price on the 14th, we then take a couple of days to then determine which marketer is owed what, which we then communicate to government, for government then to begin the process of payment. I assume here at Standard Group, you have probably a 30-day window to pay your suppliers. Mm-hmm. So there is a process.
Probably longer.
Probably longer.
Yes.
So there
30
is
to 60 days.
30 to 60 days.
Yeah.
So there is a process to then
But
pay.
what happened, DG? I mean, for them to feel uncertain, you guys must have gone for a long time without paying.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. These are business people. Government doesn't do what business people do. They are two very separate entities. Because I want to ask this question. Why does the government feel they have to control fuel prices? Why not just leave it to the vagaries of the market?
You've thrown on us spanner now.
I'm like,
No.
We've gone like into the fourth question before even the DG has finished answering the second one.
Actually, all right. I withdraw the question, DG.
No, we have had it. Let's go.
Let me answer
Let's
it
go.
in very simple terms.
Yes.
If the government was not to step in and regulate the market, then the oil marketers would then charge what they felt
An arm and a leg,
they should
I'm
charge.
sure.
What used to happen before the price regulation days is what's called price merging. So you have probably 3 or 4 majors, which are international companies that control maybe 60 or 70% of your market share. For instance, here in Mombasa, you have 3 stations, 3 international companies. And when one increases their prices, what do the other 2 do? They merge. They go to the same level. So you then don't have oversight in terms of how much they charge you. But I think today's context will offer some reprieve. And as I said, the delta between what we publish as the maximum pump price in this cycle and what you ought to be paying, for instance, for diesel, is a delta of 50 shillings, of which 9.9 shillings has been passed on to you as the consumer. And the
So
government,
that's what you increased it by?
Yes, and the government is stabilizing by providing the additional 41 shillings. So if you were not having this stabilization and price regulation, you'd be paying today 173 shillings and 70 cents for super at the pump.
But DG, you've increased it by 9 shillings, right?
Yes.
You're the one who determines the price. Yet you take a very large amount in tax. The same government is going to take some money back, right?
That's correct.
How does that make sense? So
no, I think from a taxation standpoint...
So why don't you take less tax, make the fuel price a bit more normal? I mean, we can't afford.
No, I think the big issue here, from a taxation standpoint, I think that's a separate issue because taxation is legislation.
But it's one and the same. Think about it. You take a large amount in tax. You've increased the pump price. I mean, see, am I the only one? I mean, I'm just confused.
Maybe just to explain, the oil market is really a boom bust cycle. And a year and a half ago, we were talking $30 oil. A month ago, 3 weeks ago, the barrel was trading $134. Today, we are teetering between 98 and 104. And this is the nature of the oil market. And this is how even the oil companies plan on a 6-month cycle. You will then lose some money this month, you'll make some money next month, and over a 6-month period, it then evens out. So really making taxation policy or government policy on the basis of what has happened on a month basis is not probably the most prudent thing to do. But ultimately, when it comes to taxation, again, taxation is in the purview of the
Revenue Authority.
No, not the Revenue Authority, but Parliament. But again, you also need to look at it from a standpoint of government, that there are programs that need to be funded and there are programs that need to be predictable. And I'm not here to speak for government, but really to speak on what are the building blocks and what are the mechanics.
So 9 bob, let's go back to these 9 shillings, which I read somewhere it's the largest increase that's happened in a decade. In a very long time. I was told, I read somewhere it's in a decade. So given the hard times that we've been going through, people have not been working, COVID and all these things. I mean, you guys can understand. I mean, there's a way. Maybe why don't you subsidize a high amount? I mean, you're already collecting our taxes.
And I think that's the logic from a governmental standpoint, is like we don't want to allow Kenyans to bear the full brunt.
Yeah, but we can bear 9 bob.
9 bob within the grander scheme of things. And that's why I bring the number of 50.
9 out of 50.
Yes. So, and that's
So
really
the reason
the
I'm
context.
the reason I'm on the 9 bob, I'll tell you why. Because when you raise pump prices, the matatu fares go up, everything goes up. From the alcohol somebody's drinking today to the food they're eating to the market price to the mamamboga, everything goes up. My salary doesn't go up. So please, if you can ask employers to raise our salaries in accordance with fuel price or whatever the state of the economy, then that makes sense. But
You
if
know,
everything's going
the
up,
issue here isn't, in my mind, so much what is happening as making people understand why it's happening.
Correct.
that could also be true.
Because I even wonder if the open market or the market forces would push oil prices to 200. Let it. Let those who will buy fuel determine whether they're going to buy fuel or not. Because sooner or later, if the demand goes down, the very people who are selling oil will realize that this thing isn't selling. Nobody's buying this thing. I'm arguing this way for a simple reason. I understand the logic behind protectionism. But in our case, yes, you are a regulatory body. So what I'm about to say may not be in your purview. When you consider the 9 or so levies that are lumped on petroleum products, my 3 favorite ones, I have favorites. There is a petroleum development levy, number 1. Number 2, fuel adulteration levy. I really like that one. Then road maintenance levy, love it. They all make sense. And I even understand because I understand what they do. But the moment there's so much levy on fuel, I have to ask the question, so what is the government subsidizing? Because I'm already paying for it anyway. This money that I keep paying.
Hello?
Yes. So when the government says they're subsidizing, these are the monies that I've paid as levies. Where, this is not really a question, but I'm simply saying it. Where does this money go? Government usually doesn't tell you such things. Is this the money that they're using for subsidy? Then in that case, it isn't a subsidy because I, the consumer, I'm paying for it.
That's correct. It's your money. It's your money. And maybe just to explain one of those levies, this petroleum development levy, because it should be a self-funding levy. And as I said, we're living in very extraordinary times. And again, going back to the point that the oil industry is a boom-bust cycle. So today we may be talking about higher prices. Tomorrow the prices will crash. And you'll be able then to build this fund. So today we're in a place where over the last 8 to 12 months, we've been consistently paying out of this fund. But as we're seeing the trend where globally the prices of crude are going down, the prices of commodity are going down.
They're starting to come down?
Yes.
Okay.
You will then start seeing a downward trend. And when you have a downward trend, then you start building up the fund. And you're building up for a rainy day.
Okay.
So that's how the Petroleum Development Levy Fund.
So basically what you're
works.
saying, DG, is the Petroleum Development Levy, we put this money into a kitty. It's 5 shillings and
It's your
40
money.
cents.
It's your
right?
money. Yes.
Every time you're buying at the pump,
Yes.
5 shillings and 40 cents for
Yes.
petrol, for super petrol, goes in there. So in the last 12 months or so, because of the global rise of international crude prices, we have also seen local prices rising.
Correct.
And to stabilize, you've gone into that kitty and taken the money now to stabilize. And you're projecting that when the prices globally start going down, local prices will also start coming down.
That is correct.
And at that point, then we will not be stabilizing. It'll be...
You will then be rebuilding this kitty
Okay.
for the next rainy day.
Okay. Is the kitty protected by law?
Yeah, the kitty is provided for in the law.
Is
Well,
it protected in terms of this money can only be used for
For this.
price stabilization?
That is one area where we're actually currently as a regulator working on regulations with the National Treasury and the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining so that then we can be able to put in a governance framework. But the question, I've heard this question before, is this Petroleum Development Levy provided for in law? Yes, there is no way this levy could have been levied on Kenyans without having a legal framework. There is a legal framework. But there is a governance framework that is in the works in terms of a regulation to be able to have a governance framework so that then you can be even more transparent. I think going back to the issue of taxes, I think the energy and petroleum sectors are probably the most transparent, because when you look at your power bills, and I know today we're not here to discuss power, but that's still within our mandate, and also your fuel, you're able to see a gazette notice that tells you these are the taxes. But I'm sure sometimes you walk into the supermarket and you buy a loaf of bread, or when you go to a hotel, there's a catering levy, there's a tourism levy. And you don't see it because what you get is an all-in cost. So I think, particularly for the energy sector, you should be commending us, because what you see is all the components in terms of a price build-up, including what the margins are for the oil marketers.
You are right. We need to commend you. You do.
I was going to say commendation.
No, true.
Let's take a break.
Yes.
On that note, it's 8:30. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room. Eric Latif, CT Muga. Our guest host today is Angela Ngwenyi, and our guest this morning, now until 10, is Daniel Kiptoo, the Director General of the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority. We want to understand what's been happening with fuel at the pumps. We want to understand when the stabilization will happen, when we are going back to normal, and also very many other things. Keep it here for that.
This is The Situation Room.
Daniel, you were explaining to us how you control the price. I mean, how you announce the price controls that run for a month. And then, in this particular case, when you're applying the price stabilization mechanism, how you end up then compensating the oil marketing companies. The conversation that's been out there for the last 3 weeks is the government has not paid the oil marketing companies, and that's why we have the jitters in the market. And you said that may not necessarily be the case. So take us through, in an ordinary month, let's say December last year, when EPRA on the 14th came up and said these are going to be the prices for the next 1 month, and there's going to be a price stabilization mechanism. We are going to refund the oil marketing companies this much. How did you pay them? How do you end up paying them?
All right, Eric, maybe just to take a step back.
Yes.
Before you get the 14th and how you pay them, I think you need to go 2 months back. So 2 months prior to the 14th of any month is the industry, the government, the Kenya Pipeline Company, working in conjunction with the regulator, look at what are the import projections. And as I said, not only for the country, but for the region.
Yeah.
And based on that, then you have your import quantities. And you then call for a tender. When you call for a tender, this is a globally traded commodity. All the importing companies licensed by EPRA bid to import on behalf of the industry. Once they win the tender, the vessels are then scheduled, because you have a berth in Mombasa, which will then need to be prioritized in terms of which vessel comes first, what we call vessel scheduling. Once that happens, then you have a date range within which your vessel should be at the port of Mombasa. Your ship sails, it docks at the port of Mombasa, discharges its product, it gets into the Kenya pipeline system. At that point in time, then that product is shared amongst all the oil importing companies. And as I said, it is shared on the basis of market share. Then we are the regulator. We are governed by regulation, which allows us then to set the maximum prices. This has a formula. So what we do is just input the building blocks. We look at, in any particular pricing month, which are the cargoes that arrived between the 9th of the preceding month and the 10th of the pricing month. We then take an average of that, and that becomes the basis of your landed cost. We then add all the other building blocks which are already provided for. Your margins, your cost of transportation by pipeline from Mombasa to Nairobi, on the way to Eldoret, Nakuru to Eldoret and to Kisumu. Then the road transport to the station. And then we add your dealer margins and you add your taxes. So it is a very mechanical process. Once we do that, then we set the prices. From last year in April, when we started the process of stabilization, is we then look at what the price ought to be at the pump. We then have a conversation with the government in terms of how do we apply this stabilization fund. And we then arrive at a decision on, do we hold the prices constant and draw from the kitty, or do we allow the prices to go as they should be? And that now is the process of stabilization. Once we then land that, we as a regulator then announce the prices on the 14th. We then take another couple of days to then look at that stabilization amount and how it should be apportioned between the marketers on the basis of their import allocation. We as the regulator then communicate this to the government through the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining. They then have an engagement with the National Treasury, and there's a lot of back-end administrative work that happens to allow then the oil marketers to be paid. And this takes me back to the point in terms of the challenge we've seen the last couple of weeks. Was it caused by payment or non-payment by the government? The answer would be no. Why? 49 billion shillings has been applied in stabilization in the past year. And of that, government is in no arrears. As of Thursday, the delta, which was remaining, which was close to 15 billion shillings, was actually remitted to the oil marketing companies. And the process I've just explained, particularly post the 14th, once we announce the pump price, is the period within which oil marketing companies get paid. And as I said, governments are government in perpetuity. Once a government has an obligation, that obligation will be honored. And again, drawing again from private sector is that when you have your suppliers, for instance, here at the station, you then have a 30 to 60 day period within which to pay your bill.
Yeah.
So, and that is the reason why I say the issue of delayed payment or non-payment does not arise first. The time period within which you'll be paid cannot be the reason why we had this challenge.
How long does it
But yes, we're
normally
here.
take between that point when the new prices take effect on the 15th and the point when they receive their stabilization money? How long does it take? Does it take 30 days, 60 days, 90
Probably about
days?
30 days.
30 days.
Yeah.
Does it ever go beyond 30 days?
No, it doesn't. No,
Has it ever gone beyond 30 days?
It has, I believe, once.
Okay.
Yes.
In this particular time when we were seeing this uncertainty in the market, had it gone beyond 30 days?
No, it hadn't. No, it hadn't, because there had been 8.2 billion shillings that was paid 2 weeks previously. But maybe I can talk to where this challenge arose from. And I think probably that's where your listeners and your viewers would want to understand. And the jitteriness was twofold from the market. I think the first one, in terms of lack of payment, was not a good reason for the oil marketing companies. But I think that's a story maybe we could park for now, because I think from a regulatory standpoint, and also from what you heard from the government as spoken to by the Cabinet Secretary for Petroleum and also Energy, Ambassador Monica Juma, is that government is not happy with the posture of the oil marketing companies.
Okay.
But
What does that mean?
the government had given assurance to the oil marketing companies that yes, there's a challenge, and I'll talk to what the challenge was, and we're able to address that challenge and give them the assurance that we'll be able to make them whole. But we still saw a lot of hoarding of this product by the oil marketing companies. I think one of the challenges was that the lack of predictability in terms of what will government do on the 14th because of the increasing or escalating price in the international market. Because we plan on a 2-month lag basis. The oil marketing companies sometimes, as I say, they plan on a 6-month cycle. They will then sell this product into the market because, for instance, in the month that you're in, the product that you're using for pricing is the product that was imported on the N-2 basis.
2 months prior. Okay.
So the reality sometimes is that you have product in your system that is priced a bit later. So, for instance, March price product. And because of that jump of about $250 per metric ton, for instance, of diesel, you have product in the system that is waiting to be priced in the next month. And because you're not sure of what the government will do on the 14th, you're a bit jittery because you may forward sell, let me call it forward selling. You may forward sell this product into the market, and then you have a price adjustment that then you then take a hit on. So that was the bigger challenge.
So, I mean, where was the communication in this? Because what I'm hearing is because the government and the oil marketing companies were not communicating, I end up suffering. I'm a consumer. So it's not because there was no product in the market. It was because there was a lack of proper communication and unpaid bills. Because, you know,
communication, maybe speak to the communication, because we as a regulator did quite a lot of shuttling between the government and the oil marketing companies. I will tell you for a fact, over the last 3 weeks, we've had numerous meetings with the oil marketing companies. We have recognized that challenge. We're able to assure them that we'll be able to make them whole, even formally communicated to them that we'll be able to cover that risk on their part and allow them to continue selling, and also gave them an assurance, and the ministry also on the government side gave them the assurance that this is what we are going to do come the 14th. So could you then go ahead on this understanding, which was formalized on paper, to be able then to supply the market? But for some reason, the oil marketing companies were unwilling. And that's the reason you see that the government was not very happy
Has
with
this ever
with the
happened
posture
before?
of oil marketing companies. No, it has not.
So it's never happened before that oil companies have actually imported product at a higher price and they're not sure what the government is going to do come the 14th.
No, they have. But in terms of the scale of the jump, the magnitude of the jump of over $200 a metric ton,
Right.
that increased the exposure.
It did, but
Okay.
then I have to ask this question, simplistic as it is going to sound. What is our storage capacity in this country? Private and Kenya
Public.
Pipeline.
No, we do have sufficient storage in the
No.
country.
How long does it last when we're at full capacity?
Yes, we do have, on average, about 20 days, between 20 to 30 days of stocks in the country, to last the country 20 to 30 days. Actually, there is a regulation, and this is one of the regulations that we're seeking to enforce as a regulator, on minimum operational stocks, where the oil marketing companies are obligated to keep at least 21 days stocks, so that then you don't have a stock out into the country. Also, the issue of holding back petroleum products is also an offense in the law. So I think this is a separate regulatory process and enforcement process. But in terms of do we have sufficient capacity? Yes. During the period that we had this challenge, was there sufficient stock in the country? Yes. Back to the question, was there a challenge, which I've just tried to explain as to where it came about? Yes, there was a structural challenge. Did the regulator and the government come out to address this issue, working jointly with oil marketing companies? We did. Did it offer a solution to Kenyans before the 14th? There was a challenge. Why was there a challenge? I believe that is a question really for the oil marketers.
Did
So
you
if-
look at it from their standpoint? I mean, because Daniel, they are, like you said, these are businesses. And so here you are in a business operating in a very tightly controlled and regulated business and its volumes. And then there's such a huge jump in your product price. There's uncertainty on what the government is going to do. You are left exposed, just like if you use all those words, as a business, exposure, and that's a huge risk. Did you look at it and try to understand them from that point of, clearly, guys, we can understand that you are exposed and this is our guarantee and our surety to you? Did you give them such sureties?
Yes, we gave them those assurances at meetings, verbally, and even went to the next hog and gave this assurance formally in writing.
Have you given assurances in the past and not fulfilled them?
No.
No. It's a valid question.
It's a very
because-
valid question.
is a
but
valid question.
I'm smirking at his ass.
No.
No.
There's something else here. You see,
Maybe Angela from another context. Maybe you have another
DG.
context you can
No,
tell us.
I'm coming,
But
I'm
from
coming,
purely
DG, I'm
a-
sorry.
A petroleum context,
Go
the
ahead,
answer would be
Siti.
no. Yes, Siti.
what I want to know is having a refinery or refineries that function in the country, would it have any positive effect on this story we have of oil production, petroleum, etc., etc.?
Yes, we did have a refinery which stopped refining product back in 2012. Having a refinery in country would help, but then the question again is issues of economies of scale and the level of investment. Because what you see these days globally is refineries that are built to huge economies of scale. And this was the reason why the refinery was shut down. I think really, to Citi's question, the question here is around maybe three issues. One is the role of the national oil company
Yes.
in terms of stabilizing the market.
Yes.
The role of strategic stocks.
Yes.
Being able to build up stocks into the country.
Yes.
Because this really is a energy security, and energy security now is national security.
Yes.
I think to the first issue in terms of the role of national
And also oil production locally.
locally.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
I can have that as the fourth one. But I think on the first one, the national oil company was set up, and I think one of the functions of the national oil company was to stabilize the market. The national company has not been able to play that role for various reasons. But I think the government now has taken a keen interest in the national company, and I think this was also communicated by the cabinet secretary when she did speak last week on Thursday, is really how do we ensure that there is a regulation that has been in force from 2008 that has not been utilized by the national company, which is a 30% import quota for the national oil company. So the national oil company is able, out of your global demand of product in the country,
To have 30%.
30% dedicated to the national oil company. So the national oil company is able to stabilize the market. So when we have certain challenges, the government, through a government entity, is able to step in and satisfy the market. So that is one of the key outcomes and takeaways and lessons out of the challenge we've had the last couple of
On
weeks.
that point number one, before you move to point number two, on national oil company, this is not the first time that we've heard the government talking about NOC and making NOC a strategic player in the market.
Yeah.
When Kiraito Morongi was Minister for Energy, and during the time when we were introducing the price controls and all, this was one of the conversations that was top. Increase the number of stations that National Oil has in the country. increase national oil's capacity to play in the market. That started, it went for 2 years, it stopped. What is it that made it stop then?
No, I think I won't be in a place to talk about the challenges that NOC has faced, because there are quite a number. But the question we should be asking ourselves, not just as the authority, as Daniel, but as Kenyans, is even though we failed in the past, does not mean we should not try and make it work now.
It's good to understand why we failed.
Yes, and I think learning the lessons, and we have actually learned the lessons. I think one of the bigger challenges has been financing. As I said, government has a lot of competing interests. Build your roads, pay for healthcare, support other sectors. And as I said, the oil business is highly capital intensive, huge volumes, low margins, and very volatile. So the big challenge, particularly for public sector, how do you finance such a business? Because it's a game of margin, so to speak. So you make a bit and you lose a bit, and over time you then average it out. But when you come to a government enterprise, being that agile sometimes is a bit of a challenge. And how do you have access to that financing? But as you say, there are lessons to be learned. Other countries have been able to grow their national companies, both from an exploration standpoint and production standpoint, but also from a trading standpoint. And I think the national company is really trying to learn from these lessons, so then we can be able to have the national oil company play its rightful role. So I think that's one of the big areas and the big takeaways which I know government is looking to actually get into.
Okay.
In terms of the second issue,
Strategic stocks.
again, it comes to a financing issue, because the stocks that you bring into the country must be financed, and you must pay for the cost of stock holding. So we as a regulator have been, over the last 2 years, have developed some regulations around strategic stocks, around minimum operational stocks, around the role of the national company, and try to be a bit innovative based on the lessons that we've learned from other jurisdictions, on particularly how do you finance these stocks. Because as you know, these are stocks that will not sit in a tank for 10 years. You have to keep turning them around every other 6 months. You allow this product into the market and then you replenish because of the nature of the product. So for you need to be able to think about, how do I finance this? How do I make it sustainable? But more importantly, how do I not lose money? Because this is taxpayers' money.
That's why I asked that question much, much earlier on. We may have this capacity for storage that lasts maybe 20 to 21 days. But the entities we buy from have a capacity that lasts longer. The question then was, can we buy into the future? Can we say, for instance, we want to buy 3 months stock, and you keep it, but you supply it to us when we need it? Does that happen, or is this magic thinking on my part?
No, it does happen. And what you've just explained is called hedging. So you're able to hedge, but in terms of hedging also, you need to take decisions. And I think we need to recognize the society that we live in. And Kenya is highly litigious, and a lot of questions. I know a lot of your listeners will be calling in with a lot of questions, a lot of comments. We need to be sure that we have a process that is verifiable, that is auditable, particularly when it is going against you, when on a hedge is going against you. If
Why did you?
if you're saving money, Kenyans are very happy. But when you lose money, then the questions come. So I think we've really tried to be innovative in terms of regulation and try to make regulatory interventions and also suggest policies that are able to borrow from a lot of these experiences, but ensure that we fit them into the local circumstance.
They say, there's that Swahili saying, I'm probably just going to paraphrase it, it's really terrible. My Swahili is bad. When two big bulls are fighting, it's the grass in Aumia or something like that. And right now I come from a consumer perspective, because, every day we use our cars and so on and so forth. So how do we ensure that this doesn't happen again? Because what happened, for me, what I'm understanding from you is all marketing guys were not happy. They decided to withhold, which, by the way, is almost hoarding.
It's illegal.
It's illegal. So what are the measures being taken to those who are actually withholding stock and not selling to us? What is going to happen to them? Because you know them.
Yes, we do know them, and we are actually in the process. And I think this is a separate process. There is an enforcement process going on. Because for us, our job is not only to set pump prices. We have a lot of wider regulatory mandate. And I think the question you're asking, Angela, is around our role in enforcement. So what we're actually going down a path, and we have been able to look at the last 4 weeks because we know who holds what product in the system, as I was explaining earlier on, and who released product into the system. I just must say also some of the oil marketing companies were very supportive and were able to take this assurance and release product into the market, and that's why you could see some trickle into the system, particularly in the last 2 weeks. But some were not very cooperative. And you've seen certain actions that have been taken in relation to some of those who are not cooperative. And we, as a regulator, have
What are those actions? Sorry, I didn't see them.
We have we have issues, show cause letters as a regulator because this is part of the licensing conditions. Hoarding is an offence under the Petroleum Act. It is also one of the licensing conditions that they must comply with the directions that the authority gives them.
You know, they were holding for 3 weeks.
They were holding for about 3 weeks. But in those 3 weeks, there was active engagement by the government, by us as the regulator, with the oil marketing companies, which in our view, we thought was yielding a result, particularly for the last 2 weeks. But unfortunately, there was a lot of talk and less action.
But you know what that means? When you're being friendly to them and they're doing something that is illegal according to what you guys do, is because you guys also are not innocent.
No,
bills were not paid.
By the way, if we're talking of innocence, we might as well talk to ourselves, the consumer. We are also not innocent.
Never.
You know why?
You panicked.
Yes, when there's a panic,
You're right.
it's like the run on a bank. There is no bank that will be able to pay every customer it has its money if all of them went
everybody
to the
comes to
bank
withdraw.
At the same time,
That is
you're
correct.
right.
Yes.
That is correct.
It
So
was
this is what
panic
happened
buying,
with our fuel. There was a run.
Yeah.
So people who normally take 200 bob were now taking 4,000 shillings.
shillings.
Suddenly, there wasn't enough fuel for everybody. So, understanding this.
But who was coming out to calm us and tell us, no, there's going to be fuel? Because they did feel like there was a shortage. When I go to the pump price, I can't do my 1,000. I'm being told I can only fuel for 1,000. And then they block the lines. I mean,
you see, if you weren't panicking, you'd easily take the 1,000 shillings
And just go
and just go on.
and
But
wait.
because you're panicking, you
want
wanted
to.
more. You see your contribution to it.
true.
Remember, people who drive cars are adults in this country.
No.
Okay?
I'm not too sure about that, but okay.
And they're able to think.
Right?
Yes, and make decisions. Okay? When everybody wants a full tank, believe me, all the fuel you see in these petrol stations, at some point, there'll be some sort of a problem. It doesn't quite work that way. What I'm saying is this. This isn't a blame game. We have a situation where the mistrust factor that we have with our government was
You're
coming
right.
into play.
Yep.
So we were not giving the government the opportunity to actually explain themselves and say, folks,
You're
this
right.
is not quite what. We put on our mistrust lenses and nothing the government was going to say was going to make sense. As far as we're concerned, they didn't pay, and that's why we have a problem.
You make some very excellent points.
Daniel, there's some action that you took on some oil marketing companies, and the reason that you are explaining, and was also being explained by the cabinet secretary, was the action of stock that should have been sold locally going into the region. Explain, what was that all about?
Yes, I think, as I said earlier on, the rule of thumb has always been 60% to support the Kenyan market, recognizing that the infrastructure that is being utilized is Kenyan, and 40% to support our brothers and sisters in the landlocked countries. So this has been the rule of thumb, 60% local, 40% transit. But because of two items. One is that Kenya is price regulated. Some of the landlocked countries are not price regulated. And this goes, again, to dispel the myth. I keep hearing that Uganda is cheaper than Kenya on the pump. It is not true. That, coupled by the impatience of some of the oil marketing companies to wait to get paid in 30 days, culminated in conversion of some of our local stock, some of the 60% to transit. So somebody, as an oil marketing company, and I think this is really sometimes a word that is not very good to use, but is greed. Because you have a guaranteed margin in our pump price formula of 12 shillings and 31 cents.
Yeah.
So you then take this product, take it to your neighboring country. They are going to pay you in cash, and they're going to pay you a premium. So that's really the reason.
So that was the game that was being played.
Correct.
And you observed this, and now you're taking action on that.
Yes, we are.
Okay, keep it here for more. Daniel Kiptoo is the Director General of the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority. He's graciously agreed to be with us for 2 hours so that we can also open up the phone lines in the next hour. You can call in, Give me your feedback. Ask the questions. If you want to understand what's happening in our fuel regulation and oil marketing regulations, he's here. He's going to stay until 10 o'clock. We'll open up the conversations. We are on Spice FM around the country. 94.4 in Nairobi. Mombasa is 87.9. Kilifi is 97.7. Nakuru 96.0. Eldoret 96.7. Kisumu 102.5. And Nyeri is 90.9. We've been live on KTN Home, but now you can switch over to Spice FM or also YouTube and Facebook, Spice FM KE.